Most times marriages and relationships particularly suffer because people talk, but they don't communicate. They just talk to each other, but there's no real communication on the real issues, and it affects our pastors' marriages are in trouble. Their children suffer, ministry suffers, because at the end of the day, we're human, and we're challenged as pastors to deal with various personalities from different areas. And the question is, how do I handle me with respect to everybody else?
Did you know that Regional One Health is home to the oldest hospital in Tennessee, chartered way back in 1829? Throughout more than its 180-year history, the acute care hospital has evolved significantly, housing a children's hospital, tuberculosis hospital, military hospital, maternity hospital, and ultimately the regional medical center, committed to providing quality health care to all the citizens of the Mid-South. I honestly did not realize that the hospital dates back to 1829. I was doing some research. Welcome to Mid-South Viewpoint. I'm Byron Tyler. Also, it was back in 1829 that a bill was introduced in the Tennessee legislature by Shelby County Senator Adam Huntsman to appropriate funds for the opening of what would be called the Memphis Hospital. Back in 1830, get this, $3,300 was appropriated to enable the hospital to open its doors. Can you believe that? $3,300? I mean, that'll take care of your big toe, I think, if you go have some hospital treatment. Maybe so. Maybe so. And then between 1883 and 1885, the hospital averaged 80 patients per day with a per capita cost of 32.5 cents per day. My goodness. And here's one more fact, okay? I know for our history buffs, 1862, during the Civil War, the Memphis Hospital was transformed into a military hospital operated by the federal government. This is all on their website, and you can just go and check it out and learn all these great things. But we've got another thing we want to talk about, shalom. That's the Hebrew word that means peace. And we all need peace in our lives. And that's what Regional One is all about, bringing peace into the lives of those that it supports. You know, of course, spiritually, mentally, physically, all the makeup of who we are. And we're going to talk about these aspects. We've got a room full of great guests today. I'm excited. DRC DeVoe is with Regional One Health. His position is the spiritual care liaison. He's a staff chaplain. And he also happens to be from the Bahamas. And not only that, why would he want to leave the Bahamas to come to Memphis? Well, because Memphis is a great city, for one thing. He also pastors Emmanuel Missionary Baptist Church. DRC, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here.
For 14 years, yes, you left the beautiful ocean, crystal blue, turquoise waters of the Bahamas to come be among us on the mighty Mississippi.
Yes. Memphis has a lot to offer. You get to go home, and you get to go home every July, so that's the fun part. I always get to go home, so I always get to get away.
When I want to go to the Bahamas to vacation, I don't have anybody to stay with. I have to pay a hotel bill.
I'll call my mama.
We'll make a deal.
I call my mama.
What was life like growing up in the Bahamas? I mean, that's kind of like the vacation destination. Mm-hmm. People take cruise ships to the Bahamas, but what's it really like being from the Bahamas and growing up there?
It's very similar to here in Memphis. We have challenges, but the day-to-day operation, it's basically the same. The functions are the same. One of the greatest differences, they placed emphasis on uniforms and discipline. And when I say discipline, I mean there was a rod of correction. And back then, we called him the senior master. The senior master would administer the punishment, and they still do it today based on the infraction. So it's just, the difference is you spare the rod, you spoil the child.
I think we see the results of that. Unfortunately, in our country today, discipline is important. And actually, we want to talk about some spiritual disciplines later on in our time today. We also want to welcome to the microphone Walter Green with Friendship Baptist, has been on the show before. He pastors this church. He also is connected with the spiritual care side of the Regional One. It's a clergy coalition, really, to help support clergy. And we're going to find out all that stuff. But Walter, first of all, let's welcome you to the show, too. How are you doing?
Thank you. I am doing well. And yourself?
Doing great.
Good. It's good to be back here with my friend DRC from the Bahamas.
Well, and so, of course, you were born in the South, too, in New Orleans.
Right.
You know what gumbo is all about.
That's it. You know, we don't have conch fritters.
No,
we
you
have
don't.
gumbo.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
No, you don't.
Yes.
Well, and we have a rose among the thorns today.
Yes. Yeah.
We also want to welcome Donzale, who's here. Donzale is doing a great job keeping these two guys together and organized. He's trying to, but Donzale Johnson is an elder at Dominion Church. She's also going to be a guest on an upcoming program that we recorded with Colonel James Kirkwood on domestic violence. That program's coming up in another week or so, but we just had to get Donzale back in and talk about Regional 1 and this Shalom Conference coming up. She is is an administrative assistant? Is that your title officially?
I'm his stuff doer. I'm DRC's stuff doer.
So things that DRC doesn't want to do, you do.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Pretty much that's true. That's really true.
Well, so how long have you been working with this program?
I guess about 3 years. About 3 years.
She's one of the original members.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she's one of the original members of the council when this council started.
Let's talk about the council itself. One of the pastors that used to be on staff at Central Church, I saw his name on the list.
Don Gilbert.
Don Gilbert, yeah. There's how many total on the council that oversees this particular segment of Regional 1's outreach?
We have 64 members. We have a 9-member executive team. And that 9-member team is led by our illustrious president, Dr. Green, who really does a good job at holding it together. But
he does.
He really does, and we appreciate his work that he gives, his time. But we pull it together basically to make sure that clergy is well. The challenge we have in our community today is we have pastors and we have leaders who are functioning who are not well, but won't admit that they're not well. And they won't go get the help that they need. And this council is the one that brings certain things to the forefront. Hidden, suppressed anger, depression, frustration. These are the things that we try to address, because what we want to do is when we stand before our congregations, we want to know that we're well, and what we're giving them is complete information.
DRC, what a great word, and really what a great mission. Because our pastors, we were talking about this before we came in the studio, the stress and the conflicts they deal with, not only among their parishioners and their congregations, but one of my dear pastor friends, he just got sudden news that one of his family members was tragically killed. This wasn't in his church family. This was his own personal family. Mm-hmm. And so you think about dealing with the late night calls because someone's admitted into the hospital for a serious reason, maybe a car accident or whatever, and he has to minister to those needs, or she has to minister to those needs of those in their church, but then their own personal issues of family.
If we can make sure that they're okay, what they give to the people will be okay.
Now, the Shalom Conference is coming to the Fogelman Executive Conference Center Friday, April the 28th from 8:55 till 3:10. Why was those times picked, 8:55 to 3:10? I like it. It's different, you know?
Because DRC is from the Bahamas. He loves our time, and we just appreciate his creative genius.
Well,
yes.
We need that, don't we? Really, you've come together and put a lot of thought into this. This is something that you guys have broken down different sessions, and I've got a list of those, and I want to kind of go over some of them. And actually, I've got some questions related to each one. The session 1 class is going to be filled with a couple areas, one of which is spiritual disciplines. How do we develop better spiritual disciplines in our lives? Walter, I know you as a pastor are constantly challenging your congregation to develop spiritual disciplines, but this Shalom Conference we're talking about is a way that you can learn to develop spiritual disciplines. So it must be important for pastors too.
Well, one of the biggest challenges that we tend to ignore is that, like you were talking about, all of the stress that pastors face and all of the issues of life. And so you have to ask yourself, if you face these things, how do you overcome them? How do you deal with them every day, every aspect of your life? And one of the things that we believe is that if pastors can learn these ancient practices called spiritual disciplines, they're nothing new. It's not like it's from some Eastern religion. It's been practiced since the very dawn of creation, when God and Adam walked in the garden. We're talking about, how often do you spend time alone with God? How many days of the week do you just stand and be silent that you can hear the voice of God? How much time do you spend in prayer, in worship? How do you connect to God? How do you release things in your own life that God can now replenish you? And so often as a pastor, we have a tendency to do things for our congregation. But how often do we do things for ourselves that we can better serve our congregation? Pastors are faced with a lot of tragic issues. One of the things that most folks don't ever believe, pastors are faced with post-traumatic stress disorders. Why? Because, you're exposed to trauma. How do you deal with some of that stuff? Boy, how's your prayer life? How is your time alone with God? How do you, worship God? We're not just talking about worship in terms of what you do in terms of the congregation. How do you personally worship God in your own personal time? And so, and that whole segment is about using these practices that God taught us through His Word to really live that life that God wants for your life. And that's how we get to shalom.
Donzale, is there a way that we can distinguish maybe what spiritual disciplines should be a priority for us?
Well, just like Walter said, we have to make time for us and God, and that should be priority before anything else. You have to take time, and being a woman, we're faced with taking care of the church, taking care of family, and I see my compadres there laughing at me. But, we as nurturers, we tend to take care of everybody, but we don't have any time for ourselves. So for me, what I do, I make sure that I get up in the morning and I commune with God. So that's my first thing, because if I don't do that, then my whole day is shot. So we have to make sure that we have time to get our minds clear. And that should be one of the first priorities that we have.
Yeah, another class that you're going to deal with is on conflict management.
Yes.
Of course, we all go through life with conflict constantly. DRC, is conflict always bad for us, though?
No, conflict is always, and I learned this from Dr. Green when he did a workshop at our church. One of the things we do is we don't recognize the strength of a conflict. One of the things he taught us is that if you can maximize and appreciate the strength of the conflict, you're able to identify better with who you really are. Most times when there's a conflict, people have a tendency of running away. But the real question is, can I use this deficiency to become an efficiency for me? You cannot always believe that your deficiency will cause you to fail. Your deficiency will become your efficiency. And that's where people have got to not be afraid of conflict. You've got to stop and address it and deal with it. And that gives dignity to the solution, because the solution is not just from your mouth, but it's from your heart.
Right. Walter, I would have to think there's probably all kinds of sources of conflict. What typically are some of the major sources of conflict that a pastor faces?
I would say people's passion. And that's going to sound strange. But when we start thinking about people's passion, your passion may not be the same as another person's passion. And so when those two passions come into the same environment, they may rub each other wrongly. Mm-hmm. And so it's not that so much we are so different. It's just that we are so passionate about our issues that sometimes we're close to others' issues. But when we can learn to appreciate the passion behind the situation, then we can be able to communicate and find a win-win solution. And I think that's our struggle. Our struggle is that what we have a tendency to do is see conflict as a sabotage, as an all-out assault, versus realizing that it's just somebody is really excited about something that you may not be excited about, and you got to understand their excitement and appreciate them for who they are.
I like that. Donzale, what about the problems living with unresolved conflict, or maybe failing to manage it properly? You're going to talk about conflict management, and we're kind of giving some good points here. But what about failing to deal with it, though? Because that can be destructive if we don't deal with it properly.
Especially in the church. Say two ministers, they have something that they're battling about, but the passion is still the same. And so if you just say, okay, well, we're going to our separate corners, we're just not going to deal with each other. But you're in the same ministry. So after a while, that can rise up. And it can be destructive to the ministry. It can be destructive to your personal life. It can be destructive to all areas of your life because there's unresolved issues that, people need to deal with. Yeah. And a lot of times we don't deal with our issues. And it's not because we don't want to. It's because we really don't know how.
Right. And I think, DRC, too, if we suppress certain conflicts, maybe if we're dealing with in our home life, maybe one of our children is struggling in an area of their life, we're feeling a conflict there in the home, and we don't properly deal with it, that might act out in our pulpit ministry or in our ministry at church.
It becomes who we are. So everything you say is centered around your personal conflict, but you don't really know it until you identify it yourself. And most times marriages and relationships particularly suffer because people talk, but they don't communicate. They just talk to each other, but there's no real communication on the real issues, and it affects our pastors' marriages are in trouble. Their children suffer. Ministry suffers because at the end of the day, we're human, and we're challenged as pastors to deal with various personalities from different areas. And the question is, how do I handle me with respect to everybody else? When we suppress the things that's challenging us, like you say, it's going to come out in one way or another, and most times your spouse will feel it or your children will feel it.
Something I'm just kind of sensing from you is you're each sharing your stories and talking about, the importance. And this council, too, this clergy council here, I mean, this has got to be just a great resource. The Shalom Conference is going to be great. But I was just thinking about being part of this network, the Council of Clergy, here. Mm-hmm. I mean, the 64 plus. Right. I'm sure there's room for more to grow,
yes,
right?
Yes, there's a lot of room. There's a lot of room for it to grow. And because the one thing that our president, Dr. Green, has always said is make it count. Don't just meet to meet, but make it count. Don't just get together and have a good lunch and talk old stories. When we leave there, you have to leave knowing I've improved in one area of my life or another. We've gone past that just getting together to socialize, but now we're to the point where we're willing to say, my marriage is in trouble. I need somebody to help me. I'm having strange thoughts. Somebody help me. My home is falling apart. Somebody help me. We're at that point where we want to make sure that this council meets the needs of the persons who are attending so that they can be empowered to change.
So really what I'm hearing you say here is creating a safe place for pastors to be transparent.
Yes.
When you come and say, hey, I'm having trouble with my marriage, or I'm having trouble with one of my children, it's difficult to take that message, in your church. Talk about managing conflict. Sometimes that can just create more conflict.
Yes,
is that right, Walter?
Yeah.
Definitely. DRC is on point. Our whole council, our focus is how do you help those who serve the kingdom of God and serve God's people become better at serving? And how you better serve is to help serve them. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the reasons we come together. That's why this Shalom Conference is so important. So often me as pastors, we some busy folk. We got more conferences that you can shake your stick at, but when we start thinking about our world, when we start thinking about our city, when we start thinking about the communities that we worship in, the communities that we serve in, our city is hurting. And, and a lot of people are hurting because they have lost the connection to peace. We have substituted peace with alcohol, drugs. We have substituted peace with domestic violence, with things that do not make us fulfill. And that's why we are doing this. Because if we do not do this, then unfortunately the enemy wins. Mm-hmm. The adversary wins. Yeah. And by golly, I just don't believe I'm about to quit on God to allow the adversary to win this thing.
No, sir.
I like the intentionality of this whole conversation that we're having. And if you, pastor, listening right now, you wouldn't have to be a pastor to come to this Shalom Conference.
Not at all. It is open to everyone. And Don Zalay would say, all women are invited. We are so inclusive.
Yes, they let a couple of women in.
Yeah. But I love the form here of peace. We need peace in our city because we're talking about the unseen warfare that we as followers of Christ fight every day. Mm-hmm. And we know that those pressures obviously are even mounted as our pastors. They're trying to give us the word, lead us with the vision that God has called them to. Mm-hmm. The enemy doesn't want that to happen. So they do need this source of being replenished, being refreshed. Again, I just remind our friends now, April 28th, Friday, from 8:55 to 3:10 p.m. at the Fogelman Executive Conference Center and Hotel, 330 Innovation Drive in Memphis. Now, what's exciting about this, there's no cost. It's free, but you need to register. Is that right? And how do we register?
You register online. There's a link to our website at regional1health.org, and we have a link there once you click on that link. Or you can just call 901-545-6270. And we'll register you.
That makes it easy. Real
One
convenient.
phone call.
Okay.
For those folks who are not computer savvy, you just call 901-545-6270, and we'll register you.
Talking about some of the classes we mentioned about spiritual disciplines, conflict management. I like this one, creating balance to make things happen. Tell me about that one, Donzale.
Creating balance to make things happen is the one that I need the most. That's what I can tell you about that one.
Tell me about it.
Well, creating balance, because if you don't have balance, nothing happens.
Right.
You can have 10 things you're doing. You'll start, for me personally, I can say, I can start doing this and I need to do this. And I'll start doing this and I'll stop and I'll start doing something else and I'll stop. And you never get anything done. And that happens a lot of times. We get sidetracked. So creating balance, you have to figure out, okay, how do I finish this project before I start another one? And then if we do that, we'll end up with peace in our lives and we won't be so frazzled and we can sleep at night and won't have a lot of conflict in our lives.
You know what? That's a good word. I think I need to come just for that one seminar myself, because I find myself doing the same thing. And then you get frustrated by the end of the day saying, what did I accomplish? That's a good one. There's going to be a panel discussion, too, talking about the balance of mind, body, and spirit while you remain true to your faith. That's a good one, DRC.
That's a really good one.
Yeah.
This discussion is going to cause us to realize that regardless of my denomination or my faith persuasion, I've got to be true to my faith. And the question is, what do you believe about the God you serve? How does the God you serve affect how you serve? Because sometimes people will inevitably blame God for stuff not going the way it's supposed to go.
Yeah.
But the truth is, how do you balance that in your everyday life and remain true to the fact that above everything else, I might operate as a Baptist, but I'm a Christian. So if I'm a Christian, am I going to hold true to the Christian standard, the Baptist standard, or live by what God says?
Yeah.
And this discussion is going to be one that I think is going to really invoke a lot of thought into knowing that even though we're different, we're really all the same.
Because we all have the mind, we all have a body, we have a spirit. Mm-hmm. And trying to find a balance, because I know sometimes, like for me, I can spend time trying to make sure my thoughts, my attitude, and I'm focused in that area, that's going good. And then spiritually speaking, like Pastor Green said about spending time alone with God, making sure that's on track. Then I neglect my body, Mm-hmm. I'm starting to eat the wrong food. You can get health issues, too. I mean, pastors can be challenged. They get so busy with mind and the spirit. Pastor,
Brother Tyler, we don't have food issues. We just eat all the time. But you're right. I share with our congregation, I have a donut challenge. But the truth is, we have to take control over our bodies, because if we do not deal with this body, can we ever really serve God people fully?
Yeah.
And that's the issue, because if we're sick, we're broken down,
right.
We can never get to the people that God has called us to serve. And so that's the real challenge. So when we start talking about, shalom, because most folks just hear the peace, but we talking about shalom also mean well-being. Mm-hmm. That means, physically well-being, and when you look at the picture word of the Hebrew, it shows by a shepherd's staff that what God intends to do is to disrupt anything that prevents you from having the peace that God has designed for your life. So if it's something against your health, if it's something against your spirit, something against your mental capacity, that is not what God wants in your life, because God wants us to give our body, our mind, soul, to give him glory.
Great word there, Pastor. After you run a 26.2-mile marathon, you've got to replenish your body, especially with water. You got to put water back into your body. And you listening right now, pastor friend, you've been running a marathon. You're just maybe on your last nerve with a conflict you're dealing with. You need to replenish. You need to surround yourself with a group of people who love you and are walking through the same valleys and struggles that you are. And that's why the Shalom Conference is especially designed for you to come to on Friday, April 28th, 8:55 to 3:10 p.m., Fogelman Executive Conference Center and Hotel, 330 Innovation Drive in Memphis. But you need to call this number and register. It's free. There's no cost, but please register. And if you're a pastor listening, why don't you bring a pastor friend with you that might not have heard our program today? Please call this number, 545-6270. Mm-hmm. And again, 545-6270. That's the number to call. Or you can go online to the Regional One Health website, which is regional1health.org, and there's a link there that you can sign up. Either way, there's no cost. Please come. For some reason, if you're not able to come, please connect with this clergy organization here in town. This is one event of many they sponsor throughout the year. I guess there's other meeting times you get together. Is that right?
Yes. We meet the second Monday of every month.
Okay.
The second Monday of every month, we have lunch. We have a planned schedule of events that we have. We have speakers coming in. We have moments of empowerment. We spend a lot of time praying, but we really have the second Monday of every month. We get to at 12 noon. We have lunch first, and the lunch is pretty good, if I might say so myself. The lunch is pretty good, but we have every second Monday of every month at Regional One Health.
All right, Donzale, I want to say thank you first of all, because you really are an amazing lady. You've been through a lot. Your story is compelling, and we're not going to share the details because we're getting ready to run out of time. And I want our friends to hear the program coming up with you as you share your stories. We talk about domestic violence. But I want to thank you so much for letting me know about this. I had no idea. You're the one that initiated this whole program today. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
She does have a lot going on, guys, and we appreciate so much what she does. Walter, thank you, too. Good to have you back in the studio. DRC, I've met a new friend. Thank you for coming by.
Yes, you have. Thank
man,
you.
I love that jacket you got on, man. The bow tie, looking good. Thank you for coming all the way to the Bahamas to bring sunshine into our life here in Memphis. Seriously, thank you for what you do for our city, each of you. Thank you for what you do, laboring for Christ. Pray God's richest blessings upon you. Friends, go dial that number, go to the website, and let's connect with this organization. Shalom, peace. You need it. We all need it. And this is a great conference coming up on Friday, April 28th. You don't want to miss it. Thanks so much for your time. We're going to have to say goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Friends, that's all the time we have on today's Mid-South Viewpoint. I do appreciate you stopping by. I'm Byron Tyler. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.